Welcome to the Tradie Wife Life podcast, brought to you by Tradies in Business, where we talk to tradie wives about their goals, their challenges, their hopes and dreams, and how their trade business can help with that. Hello, listeners, and welcome back, Warwick, to the Tradie Wife Life episode. How are you? Thank you for joining me.
Hello, Nick.
I'm going to be really honest now myself here. We are batch recording today because it's coming up to Christmas time. It's super, super busy. We are stacked full of appointments, working hard to support our tradies as we roll in through the new Christmas period in the new year. And so we've come off the back of recording a bunch of Tradies in Business episodes where Warwick acts as one of us has got to be the boss when it comes to the episodes. One of us has got to do the intro and press the buttons, so on and so forth. And of course, when we come onto the TWL episodes, that's my job because it's my podcast. And of course, I could not get my head right. We've had to dump a recording already because I stuffed it up. So thank you for persevering with me, Warwick. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Nicole. I'm playing the submissive role here today.
Well, I hope you don't take it too personally.
Take what personally?
Oh, that you have to have the submissive role in this podcast today.
I don't care. It's just what you do.
So I can't even make that into anything.
That's because that's how it is. I don't give a shit. Ooh, am I allowed to say that on this one?
Yes, you can. Yeah, we'll just mark it explicit. Swear away. I think it's important to note that we're talking about communication in one form or another and feelings today because feelings are big and they're heightened at this time.
I'm really busy, Nick. Can we not talk about feelings today? I don't have time for feelings.
The conversations with me about feelings are much easier than the ones that go on in our home. So I think you and I work through feelings pretty quickly.
Yeah, because I can just hang up the Zoom and go and have dinner with my family.
I think it's a great time to act as a reminder as we come to the very end of our podcasting year. We're going to have a bit of a break here on Tradie Wife Life. As one of our last episodes, though, we're going to talk about feelings and how quickly something that isn't necessarily personal feels personal.
Feelings, nothing more than feelings.
Well, I have not prepared anybody for your singing on this podcast.
That's not really singing if we're going to get technical. Yeah, it's tricky, Nick. So much of business triggers emotion in business owners, customers, staff, because it's all human relationships, right?
Yeah, it is. And you and I are, when we record here on Tradie Wife Life, we're talking about the fact that you're generally working with your spouse, right? In either way, it doesn't matter which of you is listening to these episodes. And that's a great opportunity for a lot of feelings to come out and jump in the way and can make it really hard to separate between business and personal. And suddenly, that disagreement that you had last night over something with the children turns into a whole bunch of new feelings when you come into your workday the next day. It can be very hard to balance.
It's like having clay stuck on the bottom of your boots.
Yeah.
No matter how you try and scrape that off, you just drag it into the next interaction, especially when it's the same person. It's different, say, for you and I who work together in business, and whatever the interaction is we have, less of that sticks to the boots as we go into an interaction with somebody else, be it our significant other or our kids. But when you're married to or living with the person you're working with in your business and you have a crappy interaction, like you say, at the dinner table or bathing the kids or whatever, and then later that night you got to both sit down and go through the quoting stuff together or the invoicing or the finance, often they're very triggering topics as well.
Yeah.
That previous crappy interaction often gets dragged into the next one, which makes that one crappy as well. And then that gets dragged back into a family thing on the weekend. And it just seems to follow us around.
Well, your feelings are already heightened if you've had some sort of disagreement or you bumped into each other in one form or another. Your feelings are already heightened, and therefore anything that you talk about after that evokes more feelings. And it can, to our detriment, we often think that our spouse is being critical when they're just talking about a fact. The fact is there isn't enough money in the bank, and that has come about because we didn't invoice in time. Why didn't that happen? Well, because I got interrupted by the kids, or we had a school concert, or I don't know. There's always 100 reasons why things don't happen. but that bumps into a really uncomfortable conversation. Your feelings are already heightened because you had a disagreement over something at dinner time. How do you not take that personally? I get it. It's really hard. And yet, if you and I have that conversation, because we're not spouses with one another, it doesn't turn into a personal, I'm offended because of something you've said, or I don't know, I just don't take it personally most of the time. And so it makes that interaction cleaner, seamless. You get to move through it rather than being stuck in the hurt that it evokes when it's your partner.
There's this whole thing that gets bandied about of, oh, it's just business. It's just business. It's just a business decision. Don't take it personally. And I think a lot of the time blokes say that because, or men, I should sort of use proper language here. Men say that, males say that because that's kind of how our brains and our emotional beings work. The two are in different boxes. They're in separate rooms in our brain.
Mm.
And as most of us know, women aren't like that. You have one room with everything in the same room. Neither one is best. Neither one is right. They both have strengths about them and constraints about them, just like everything else to do with males and females. You know, there's differences, but there's not just blanket advantages where, you know, one is better than the other all the time. There are contexts and settings where, you know, it's helpful to be able to compartmentalize that stuff. And that also becomes a massive constraint for men because we're not able to actually perceive how somebody else might feel about, oh my gosh, I have such a classic example of this, Nick. I'm going to share a family thing on your podcast that was shared with me by another family member, but I happen to know that a particular male family member of mine was trying to fit some groceries in the fridge at his place. And his wife has changed to soy milk. They also have an exchange student, and I know my brother is not going to listen to this podcast, so I'm just going to say who it is. They have an exchange student in the house, and the exchange student drinks oat milk. The wife's on soy milk.
Mm-hmm.
My brother is on cow's milk, and so are the kids. And so there's like 3 kinds of milk in the fridge, which meant there was no room in the fridge door to put any other drinks. And so the decision was made to throw out a half bottle of almost flat mineral water because, like, it's not going to fit in the door anyway. And said brother made the comment in front of his wife, not directing it at her, but just made a typical male statement of, yeah, throw that out because it's not going to fit in here with 3 kinds of milk in the door. And
Yep.
the wife lost it and like tore his head off because of his critical, judgmental comment.
Yep.
And he was left standing there going, what did I say? I just said there's no room in the door for because there's 3 kinds of milk in here. And it was like, leave me alone, okay? I'm making choices for my health and blah, 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 and wouldn't even like have morning tea with the family who were visiting because of the milk comment. But that's the difference, right? Now, if that's said about exactly the example you were sharing, Nick, because my brother and his wife work together. So you can almost guarantee that there's stress and pressure from work that's been carried into a domestic setting, and then the milk thing will get carried into the next time they talk about finances and invoicing. And I think the best thing that men could do is accept and understand that not everybody thinks like us. It's not that simple. It's not black and white.
I think there's a good opportunity for us to talk about how the perceptions. So let me clarify this because it's cementing as I'm talking through it. I think there's a super skill to be had in sharing the way that you are feeling or what you've heard when you say that I feel this kind of scenario. And so, because we're talking about spouses and you can't remove the fact that you are in a personal relationship when you're at work, because why would you? It's just the way it is. And so I think that we have to get good at giving the feedback in a way that it can be heard or understood so that the male partner, and I know we talk so stereotypically here, and sometimes it's the other way around, I get it, and we're just talking the way it is in most relationships with trade businesses. But, when we think we're really good at understanding that women have this huge emotional load, and we forget that men also carry a big load. It's a different load for sure, and they're carrying a huge load, and they often can't see the wood for the trees, neither can we as ladies. And so when we sit down and have these interactions, they can be very fact-based or pragmatic from a male point of view. And from a female point of view, we have a lot of emotion tied to what we're doing. And so it comes across as an attack, like the milk example. I can totally hear where that has come from. I totally understand that reaction. And what I think that we need to take responsibility to do for ourselves, again, regardless of who you are listening to this podcast, is give the information back. When you say that, I hear or I feel this. Because often the other thing I've seen time and time again in our interaction with our tradie couples is something has been said. I've heard it one way, you've heard it another way. The person who delivered it heard it the way they think they delivered it, and the receiver heard it a different way again. And so you've got 4 different lenses looking at this opportunity. Instead of there being clarity around that, there becomes confusion or a bunch of hurt feelings because I assume this is how you're saying something. And so I think the real power or the real opportunity here, if you're listening, is to give some clarity about what you've taken out of that interaction. Now, that can be, you have to be vulnerable to do that. That can be challenging. So I think there's some value to having the conversation about how you're going to do that moving forward prior to starting to do it so that that vulnerability can be supported. But I think it's a super skill to be able to talk through what comes up for you when those things happen, rather than just letting it go or letting it build into an emotive response or anger, which is emotive, but the myriad of different emotions that we feel outside of that reaction or interaction, sorry.
I feel like it comes back to a decision to take ownership of our feelings, or I shouldn't say lack thereof, because men have feelings.
Oh, yes, you do.
They happen differently. They happen in a different time frame, and they happen in a different plane to the way women have feelings. And they might come out later and look different. And unfortunately, without spiraling too far off into social commentary, there's a lot of judgment about what's an appropriate way to express our feelings as a human. And so I think a lot of it is just in that relationship example that you're using, Nick, is for each party perhaps to make an explicit agreement with each other. It's like, look, from now on, I'm going to take ownership of my feelings and how I have them or don't have them. And some of that might just look like saying sorry. If you have a crappy interaction, is say, look, I'm sorry, that sounded black and white. That wasn't what I meant. And then it's up to the other person to say, okay, I accept that. Like, you have to make a choice to accept that or continue to stoke the fire and say, well, yeah, sure, you say sorry, but, because it's our emotions are a choice. They don't always happen mindfully, and they happen because of how we start our thought processes. But most of us do a lot of unconscious thinking, and therefore we have unconscious feelings. So it's probably just stepping into that ownership space and giving myself advice here, Nick. So I certainly don't do this well all the time. And I don't know. I think some of it too is business is personal. It's such a stupid statement. It's not personal. It's just business. That's dumb. It is personal. We're people.
I don't know how it isn't personal. I understand the context of the statement, and yet there's no way that you can separate yourself from who you are and what you do.
That's right.
Easily. You can do it with a lot of work, but it's generally, as a first thought, we're one and the same. And so when we're having those highly emotive conversations, that would be emotive if it was you and I as non-partners.
Yeah.
Then of course it's going to be extra emotive as a couple. And then you feed into that all of the other hundreds of things that happen. And because there's no formality to many of these interactions, they happen on the fly after the kids have gone to bed or over the phone as you're driving to work, or, there's no formality to that. It makes those interactions ripe for disagreement. So maybe some of this also is to approach your business as if it was somebody else's business in the way we give formality and space to some of those hard conversations that might need to be had. Perhaps there's an opportunity there for you to make a change as well, so that it won't make it less personal. It just means that it becomes a different kind of interaction from the outset. And I think that can make a significant difference to the way you're heard and the way you feel heard, and the information can be processed moving forward rather than getting stuck in a yucky interaction.
All right. I'm thinking about how I can do better, Nick.
I think, isn't that the purpose of the podcast, so that we can all do better? Sometimes I feel like they're just therapy for you and I.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we can do better today, Warwick. Okay, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think particularly for the ladies, there's a tendency to invalidate yourselves with this sort of critical analysis of what's happened. I think listening to a podcast like this would be more challenging for the ladies, because the guys, a part of our makeup is to have a blue with your business partner or your staff member or your best mate or whatever, and you probably call each other all sorts of names and want to get in a punch up, and then half an hour later, it's like, yeah, whatever, mate. And that's something that I'm very grateful for as a man, that I have a little bit of that. But it's also not a very good thing to carry into interactions with your spouse or your kids, because those cuts stay.
Yeah.
For everybody, but particularly for those with the feminine energy. And so that's where I still believe it comes back to that ownership and responsibility around, accepting that business is personal. And if you want to have a great business, then they're just skills to work on. It's not a judgment of who's better or worse. And I think for the ladies, it's hard not to feel that way. And as a bloke, I'm just going to say, don't take it personally.
That's terrible. We're going to get hate mail off this. Well, I hope there's some information in there today that helps you with some of the interactions at this very, I call it a spiky. Feels like every interaction at this time of year feels like a spiky interaction. It's really hard. It's not pleasant. It can be very challenging. And we encourage you to try and get through this period as a partnership rather than continuing to spike into each other. You save that for your clients. No, don't. You want to be nice.
Do that. Save it for your therapist.
But try and do it together in a way where you can, navigate some of these bumps. I wish you lots of luck at this time of year. And I think that's it for this year. The podcast is going to take a break all the way through until the beginning of February. So thank you for being on this journey with me, Warwick. I do like our She Says, He Says episodes. They're a lot of fun. I like that we're able to explore some of these ideas in a way that could be tricky, but we're getting some great feedback. So it appears that the listeners are enjoying them, and we'll be back for some more next year.
I'll put my foot in my mouth again next year.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much for listening. Have a wonderful festive period and good luck.